Thank you all very much. All very welcome to the Institute. My name is Alex Wright. I'm Director General here. And thank you for your attendance. Looking forward very much to hear from our distinguished speaker. I suppose just thinking about this event as others, you could open every event now with the short sentence, "We live in uncertain times," but there's no doubt that we do. The geopolitical landscape has become more unstable, even more unstable perhaps in recent weeks, and the threat posed by nuclear weapons to humanity seems more acute now than before. So at this uncertain time, it's more important than ever. I think we could all agree, and I think perhaps people across the world would agree, that it's ever more important to renew our efforts to ensure that we can live in a more secure and therefore more certain world, or less uncertain world. So I'm sure it's on some of those themes that our distinguished guest will reflect, drawing on his experience. I want to thank Ambassador Stephan Klement for taking the time to speak with us, and our distinguished chair and moderator Alison Kelly will introduce the ambassador more fully. So thank you to Alison for agreeing to chair and to moderate this event, and thank you all for your attendance. And I hand over to Alison.
Thank you very much, Alex. Good afternoon. I'm Alison Kelly. I was once upon a time the Director for Disarmament and Non-Proliferation when I worked with Stephan. So it's a great pleasure to see you again here in Dublin. Really nice. Then I went on, I was ambassador to the Czech Republic and Ukraine, and then I retired from my posting as ambassador to Israel 5 years ago. So I'm pleased to welcome you to this event. The strained geopolitical context in which we now find ourselves represents a very significant challenge to the disarmament and non-proliferation agenda. While these challenges remain, it'll be important in the coming years to work towards implementing the 3 pillars of the NPT: nuclear disarmament, non-proliferation, and peaceful nuclear uses. And of course, Ireland has always been very committed to the NPT since it was one of our ministers, Frank Aiken, who conceived of the idea going back to the late 1950s, early 1960s. So we're delighted to be joined by Ambassador Stephan Klement, EU Special Envoy on Non-Proliferation and Disarmament. He'll speak to us for about 20 minutes, if that's okay, and then we'll go to questions and answers in the room and online. To those in the room, if you want to ask a question, raise your hand. Somebody will bring the microphone to you, and please identify yourselves. To anyone asking questions online, same thing. I'll handle it here as best I can. And a reminder that today's presentation and question and answer session are on the record. So please feel free to join the discussion on X Twitter using the handle @IIEA. So Ambassador Stephan Klement is the EU Special Envoy for Disarmament and Non-Proliferation, a position he has held since February 2024. From 2019 to 2023, he served as EU Head of Delegation to the international organizations in Vienna. Since 2016, he has served as the Special Advisor for the Iranian nuclear issues in the European External Action Service. And I know that that's something that took more of your time than anything else. He holds a doctoral degree in international law from the Institute of International Law and International Relations, University of Vienna, a doctoral degree in physics, and he also is a master's in law and a master in theoretical physics, all from the University of Vienna. So please, Stephan, the floor is yours.
So first of all, thank you very much, Alice, for this very kind and a bit frightening introduction, because the immediate message is, can this guy do anything serious, because with all this background. So, and thanks for the Institute, and thank you, Alex, for welcoming me here today. It's really a privilege and honor for me to be in Ireland, the island having played, as you rightly said, such an important role in the development and the history of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and this is why I feel particularly honored to be here and to speak to the audience here and online, I understand. You mentioned already the NPT in the geopolitical context, which is a bit kind of the theme of my remarks. You also mentioned that I had the kind of the curse or the privilege to work 20 years on the Iran nuclear negotiations. So apologies if at some point I will drift off to the Iran subject. This is, as we call it, professional deformation. There's no more way out of this. But starting with the NPT, I think, as you rightly said, the EU, the European Union, has always aimed at a balanced implementation of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which is, of course, not easy for European Union if you look at the composition of the EU in terms of different types of member states. In the past, I would have said there have been nuclear weapon states in the EU. Now there's only one. There have been states who are part of a nuclear alliance. There are states who basically are declared neutral. There are states who are very much opposed to use of nuclear energy. Others fully relying on for their energy mix on nuclear energy. So it's a kind of a very interesting starting point for discussions. But I would like to say upfront, why is it so interesting to have the EU as a player and EU member states as a player in this international framework? Because what happens already in Brussels in this kind of Brussels machinery and all this sounds very kind of pragmatic or sterile. In the end, it's a microcosm of what happens in a global scale to forge consensus position elements which can provide common ground for further expansion of the discussion. I think this is why the EU has been a central player in the NPT context. Of course, today, and I come from this theoretical look at the NPT, I come to today. Today, the world has changed. We say all the time, the world has changed in the last 3 years, since February 2022. The world has also changed. Some people may argue since a bit more than 1 month, since January 2025. I mean, the kind of understanding and the kind of basic logic which we applied in our security considerations does not necessarily apply anymore. We see also, if we go quickly pillar by pillar, pillar 1 on nuclear disarmament, we see a few concerning trends, of course. I would mention, first of all, the increase of China, of its nuclear arsenal, which is enormous. We see the Russian nuclear rhetoric and the change of doctrine, which has also contributed to further aggravate the situation. And we see some maybe a bit more positive elements if we look at some more efforts to inject transparency and accountability in the debate. But overall, of course, I think it's fair to say from an objective perspective, nuclear disarmament has not moved very far. And we see also, of course, in the kind of the relationship between the two biggest nuclear powers, a total stalemate. This is maybe one of the few things which could change in the next year. But for the moment, we see the New START treaty expiring in exactly 1 year, in February 26, and no replacement agreement. This could lead to a further kind of fueling of a nuclear arms race, in particular if you take also the Chinese dimension into account. On the second pillar, non-proliferation, I mentioned already Iran, and I will come later to this. This is definitely not a success story, unfortunately, but I will maybe in the second part of my presentation speak about it. We see with big concern the North Korea issue. I mean, if you look the last 2 decades, North Korea, from being a country which had a kind of a embryonic nuclear program, now being a not recognized nuclear weapon state, and very close to perfectionizing maybe its nuclear arsenal, its nuclear delivery systems, just for the simple reason because due to its cooperation with Russia, there's the big fear that in return, North Korea may receive some very sensitive technology, which it still needs to perfectionize its system. And on the political level, maybe even more concerning, we see a very strong move from Russia to, in a certain way, accept the status, or not officially, but to accept North Korea as a nuclear weapon state. This is very clear in some statements we've been hearing from Russia. And we see also Russia undermining kind of the very strong consensus which existed over many, I would say, even decades, to take some action in the Security Council to sanction North Korea for its behavior. And this consensus is gone now. So this is the second pillar in a snapshot. The third pillar, peaceful uses, which on the one hand has two aspects. I would here also maybe draw the attention to the demand of developing countries to benefit from not only nuclear energy, but also nuclear applications. I think here, while a lot has been invested, a lot of efforts have been undertaken, we are still facing in many developing countries kind of dissatisfaction about not having kind of sufficient access to nuclear technologies, and in very kind of basic areas, which should be a given, like nuclear medicine, cancer therapy, and other things. And here I'm not even speaking about the nuclear energy applications. And at the same time, also due to Russia's behavior in Ukraine, where Russia is attacking energy infrastructure, but had also illegally taken over the biggest nuclear power plant in Europe, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, we see a big threat and risk for nuclear safety and security. And a couple of weeks ago, even there was another incident at the Chernobyl site, a drone attack, and this is also a massive concern. So I think the NPT is under threat, under stress, that will be say from several sides. We as EU, and since Alice mentioned I'm the EU Special Envoy, we try, of course, to mitigate these effects. We, on the one hand, work on kind of input for the review conferences and the review cycle in the area of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, in the area of the Fissile Material Cutoff Treaty, in transparency. We also support certain projects to help developing countries to participate more in the NPT context, to prepare the chair of a future REFCON, to carry out, how to say, comprehensive consultations with regional groups. So I think we try, but of course, it is also not ignored that, of course, the focus in the European Union of today is not so much on non-proliferation and disarmament. It's to basically counter the Russian war of aggression in Ukraine. But coming maybe more to one of the key examples, which I did not go into detail at, the Iran nuclear issue. And if you look at the Non-Proliferation Treaty and the IIEA safeguard system, I think it was very clear that when NPT was negotiated, entered into force, the IIEA in a certain way was put in charge to monitor the non-proliferation commitments of non-nuclear weapon states. And since the 70s, when the safeguard system was created, there have been several crisis situations. I mean, maybe the biggest crisis situation in the last millennium was the Iraq case, when it was detected that Saddam Hussein had worked on a clandestine nuclear weapons program. And for many years, for a decade actually, it was not possible really to conclude this file. This happened only after the second Iraq war. And this was followed by some detection of a clandestine enrichment program in Iran in 2003, 2004. And at that time, I think there was a very important diplomatic effort, which was first led by the E3, later on by the E3 and the EU High Representative, and later on in the so-called E3+3 format, which is the 5 Security Council members, plus Germany, and also the High Representative, to find a diplomatic solution to this kind of Iranian nuclear program. And this culminated, as most of you will know, in the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which was adopted in July 2015 and then implemented in January 2016. And this was, I think, a landmark agreement in the sense that Iran agreed to reduce or restrict its nuclear activities, agreed to very solid and robust and intrusive monitoring by the International Atomic Energy Agency, which went far beyond what is the normal standard. And in return, there was sanctions lifting provided by E3, by EU, also by the United States, and also UN sanctions were lifted. And this agreement was very successfully implemented for 1-2 years. And unfortunately, then the first Trump administration withdrew from this agreement. And since then, if you look at the Iranian nuclear program from 2015 and today, we have unfortunately a significant difference in dimension, but also in sophistication. At that time, maybe we had 300 kilograms of enriched uranium. Now we have thousands of kilograms enriched at a much higher level, which is very close to weapons grade. And of course, we have a fully developed program on advanced centrifuges, which would allow to carry out the weaponization step, the last step to 90% enrichment in a very small facility in very short time. Iran has also, since it kind of reduced its cooperation with the IIEA, has also not allowed the IIEA to inspect or monitor the program in the same way as it has been the case during JCPOA. So the IIEA has lost what is called continuity of knowledge, which would, in case, and I come to this in a second, in case I would call it this way, we end up in the political miracle situation that there should be no negotiations for an agreement, it would be very difficult, or at least extremely challenging and time-consuming for the IIEA to re-establish kind of a baseline about the Iranian nuclear program, and in order to provide kind of a credible assurance that there should not be any undeclared or clandestine activities in Iran. So this is from purely technical perspective I'm speaking here. It is also very important, I think, to note that Iran, of course, has always been a country which has presented massive challenges, not only to the region, but also to European players. So there have always been concerns or perceived threats by Iran on Iran's role in the Middle East, on human rights, on kind of nowadays, of course, there's cooperation provided to Russia for its war of aggression against Ukraine, but also the detention of European citizens in Iran. And it was not straightforward at the time to isolate in a certain way the nuclear dimension and to focus on solving the nuclear issue, which was done in JCPOA in 2015. Today, it's far more complicated. Also, countries in the region, they have developed some kind of self-understanding that they should play a role in kind of addressing this issue, which is to a certain extent obviously legitimate, because these are clearly the neighbors of Iran. And in the positive sense, you could also see these countries could at some point provide some economic benefits to Iran, because these countries are much closer for trade with Iran. European companies, anyway, after the US withdrawal of JCPOA in 2018, many of these European companies, they have made very bad experience, have lost a lot of money, would not be the first to go to Iran to provide economic benefits. So the region could play a role. Maybe this is a rather pessimistic talk, as you have understood so far. One of the good things in the region is that there has been a bit of more detente in the region in the last few years. We have a rapprochement of Iran and Saudi Arabia. We have better relations of Iran and other Gulf neighbors. So this could play in the positive sense. I mean, I give you maybe, not to have too long a discussion, I would be more interested to do this interactive. We have a very, very challenging, almost impossible timeline, because as you may know, the kind of the resolution of the Security Council, which carries all this mechanism about the Iran agreement, is resolution 2231. It will expire in October this year. Then will also expire what is called the so-called snapback. The snapback is a mechanism which would bring back all the UN sanctions. And the E3, which are the kind of those who have been left in the agreement, except Russia and China, who would of course not trigger snapback, they can only trigger this until after the summer. And after October, this option, this is a kind of a pressure element, would be gone. So if there should be a chance for negotiations, it has to happen now in the next couple of months. So this is very challenging. And of course, I did not mention what I may call, under quotation marks, the elephant in the room. We don't know what is the US approach here. And of course, we hear that the US reinstate what they call maximum pressure policy. Maximum pressure means maximum sanctions on Iran. At the same time, we know that compared to 10 years ago or 15 years ago, it's not so easy to implement maximum pressure, because China and Russia are very much decoupled in their trade with Iran compared to 10 years ago. Also, in a sense, Iran is known as a culture that normally do not negotiate when they are under pressure. When they put under maximum pressure, they show what I would call maximum resistance. So very tricky. And there's also, if I may say, from the US administration, at least from the level of the president, there's a very contradictory and obfuscating rhetoric on possible negotiations. On the one hand, pressure, and on the other hand, saying that want to negotiate, but then there's no concrete follow-up. You may have seen a couple of days ago this, I don't know how to refer to these rumors about a letter which has been written by the US president to Iran, Iran denying that have ever received a letter. So it is very clear that the communication from the US side is less than clear. And this, of course, does not help to address the Iranian concerns. in particular since Iran has already been, if I may say this, disappointed once when the first Trump administration withdrew from the agreement, and I myself was involved in what was called during the Biden administration the so-called JCPOA re-implementation talks. And one of the main requests of Iran at that point was to get guarantees from the US that they would not withdraw again. And you know all the US Constitution, these guarantees do not exist in the US system for such kind of agreement. On the contrary, even a president who wakes up one morning and believes he didn't like that he made an agreement yesterday with Iran, he can immediately change this with the stroke of the pen, as they say, with an executive order. So I think the prospect from this perspective is not good. I can only say from a new angle, we have been for almost 2 decades now played this role as kind of coordinator, facilitator for the Iran nuclear issue, the Iran nuclear negotiations. We will continue to play this role. At the same time, we should also be realistic. Without some kind of buy-in from the United States in some kind of process, this will not be possible to resolve from my perspective. But maybe I leave it at here. I have maybe injected enough buzzwords and open issues that at least I should trigger some questions which I hopefully can answer. Thank you, and thank you for your attention.